Welcome to another edition of the Heron Outlet. She is Alex Winley. He is Austin Robillard. I am Ian Haston. First things first, we wanted to start the podcast by sending our thoughts, our prayers, our well wishes to everybody across the state of Florida, across the Caribbean, affected by Hurricane Ian. Hopefully, listening to this, watching this, wherever you are, might bring a little bit of joy, a little bit of solidarity in these trying times. We go through hurricane season together here in Florida, and we'll all do it together. Guys, it is still a game week, and the team got out of town affected this week by Hurricane Ian, did not train on Tuesday and Wednesday. We are recording this just after the press conference Thursday morning, and that in and of itself has been pushed back several times throughout the week because of Hurricane Ian. Now, finally, in Toronto, the team was this morning and will be able to get their first training session of the week done, their only training session of the week done, later this afternoon. So let's start there. I think that we need to understand when, coming off an international break, there was so much uncertainty. Even then, you're riding momentum of a 2-game winning streak, drama throughout both wins. You're feeling good about things. Now, everything that has gone on with the international break, we'll get into that later in the show. But now with the hurricane, you're left in a little bit of influx as you're approaching this. How do you mentally compartmentalize this to maintain focus in what could wind up being a huge pivotal playoff match for the playoff race in your final road trip? Phil has challenged them with their road form. They came out against DC and proved a lot of the naysayers wrong. On that one, how do you go about staying focused amidst all this turmoil and make sure that you take care of business here against Toronto on Friday night?
It's tough. I mean, it's even a harder situation now with everything going on than it was beforehand when we had the Columbus to Chicago layover in that 10 games. And that's what we talked about last time on the pod, and how they didn't necessarily bode well in that Chicago match after this extended time off. And now you have this next extended period of time where they were off and they haven't been able to train. I believe Phil said today that they weren't able to train Tuesday or Wednesday, and they finally got back onto the pitch Thursday, but they do have to leave for Toronto tonight to play tomorrow, tonight as in Thursday night. So, it's tough, and I think the mentality of the players just has to be, look, we control everything right now. Phil also mentioned that in a press conference they're playing on Friday, and that's before every other team in the Eastern Conference, and that they get to put the pressure on, and that's how they need to go about it. If they really want to make the playoffs, they've got to put the pressure on, and they have a chance to do that playing at Friday night before anybody else, and making sure, like, hey, look, we're going to get 3 points. You want to catch up, you need to go get your 3 points. And I think that's just kind of how you have to think if you're a player, saying, look, this is our time. We control everything. And I know Ariel Lassiter was someone who was talking about it a lot, saying they can't worry about anybody else. Well, now they don't even have to worry about anybody else because they've done enough to control their own destiny in the last 3 games. And I believe last week too, I was saying on the pod that these next 3 games are it's just reminding me of like a World Cup group stage. Like it's a 3-game tournament. You need to do the best you possibly can. You have Columbus on the other end, and you're not going to play them directly, but you're playing against their results directly, and that's kind of how you have to look at it. And even for Atlanta and Charlotte, you just have to beat out a couple of teams and stay on top, and you're in a playoff spot, whether it's 7th or 6th or even 5th place. That's still all an opportunity there on the table for you. They just need to know that it's in their own hands, and that's the way you got to go about it.
Yeah, I agree. I think these stretch of games are going to be super important for Inter Miami. I think, the 5th, 6th spot in the East is kind of passed them by, and it's really a photo finish for the 7th spot between, maybe teams like Charlotte, Atlanta, Columbus, depending on how they win. Like Austin said, Miami just need to win majority of their games, and it won't be easy, but 2 of them are at home, and this last away game against Toronto will be difficult because they do have a good squad of attackers, and Insigne and Bernardeschi can hurt them, and but defensively they are suspect. And we were talking about it before we started rolling, how Toronto gave up a handful of goals in 2 games, 12 in 2 games, I think, or maybe less than that, but they've given up a lot.
4 a game for the past 3. Yeah, it's 4 a game for the past 3.
Yeah, they've given up a lot of goals in the last couple of games, so that could help Miami in that regard. But Miami don't score a lot, but they'll be coming in off confidence off of that DC win, and the they want to make the playoffs, so they'll have extra motivation. So, yeah, it'll be an interesting set of games. I think this Toronto game could set the tone for how they do at home, but and these last two games at home are probably the most important of the season against Orlando and Montreal. So if they can get a result against Toronto, I think they'll be in good standings.
Let's talk about that Toronto defense. You alluded to it, Alex. They've given up 4 goals in the past 3 games. All of those losses, all those becoming progressively worse. It was a 4-3 loss to Montreal at home at the beginning of the month. Then they traveled to Atlanta, lost 4-2 there. Then they traveled to Orlando, where they got absolutely thrumped, like 4-0 beat down by the Lions in Exploria. That really also didn't help into Miami because of the goal difference now with Orlando looks a lot wider than it did just a couple weeks ago. The defense has not looked good. Austin, you had mentioned that they have some center back issues. What are they going to be able to do there in terms of injuries, in terms of suspensions? How are they going to be able to realize what's going on?
Yeah, so it's looking like Chris Mavinga's still not going to be able to be fit to play. Hasn't played since that September 4th game, and that they had, and has been down with an injury. They said his return should be in mid-October, September 30th, which is tomorrow, is not mid-October. And also with McNaughton, who has been pretty much their mainstay at center back, other than the rotating parts of Mavinga and Shane O'Neill, he's got a yellow card accumulation suspension. So who plays next to Shane O'Neill? I have honestly no idea. I've just scoured and looked to see what other center back they've had in the last 2 months, and those were the only 3 names that I could find right now. So they're going to be scratching for a center back. If you can help me out with who that...
Yeah, Doniel Henry is probably going to be the one. He's like that super sub defender when they need a last minute, like big, tall defender to hold off games. So it's most likely to be Henry, but I don't think you get any confidence there.
Absolutely. I don't know if that partnership has even been deployed all year for Toronto, if you're thinking about O'Neill and him. So that's another thing to think about, too. I think it's going to be really tough for Toronto at the back. We know what they have up front with those Italians. But, I mean, the last time Miami played them, they're playing with half of a brand new back line. Their center back pairing that was against Miami a couple weeks ago is not the same. They aren't there. They're not available. So it's going to be interesting to see what Bob Bradley puts out.
Offensively, it always comes down to the Italians, Alex, for them, and the Italians have been so good at home. They've even scored 8 goals combined in their short time at BMO Field. We saw what Insigne could do the first, the home leg of this series with a moment of brilliance. Phil even alluded to all of the crosses that Bernadeschi got against them in the first game. And yet you went away thinking, even giving up a goal to Insigne, even giving up the crosses to Bernadeschi, that they really handled them pretty well, at least I thought, and were able to manage it. Those two are always going to get theirs for a certain extent. Now you throw in a home form in which they improve. What are the wrinkles? What could you learn from the last game that you can take with you to this one to try and at least mitigate what those two can do to hurt you?
Well, I know for one, they cannot come out in what they did against the DC in the first half. That 4-2-2-2 formation with no wingers, and they tried to really overload the middle, but they looked terrible. And if they play that against Toronto, trying to go super attacking, they're going to lose because it's just not defensively stable. So I do think that getting natural wingers on there, like Ariel Lassiter or an Emerson or Robert Taylor will help. I think maybe Campana could sit this one, maybe Bryce Duke, or Neville decides to go with Campana and Higuain up top, and then 2 natural wingers, and then Gregory and Giammatta as the 2 holding midfielders. Sort of like Japan against the U.S. men's national team, just the 2 defensive midfielders and really fluid front 4. But but they're going to have to be more defensively sound, and we'll touch on this later with DeAndre Yedlin possibly being out. That's going to make the task even more difficult, especially when Insigne lines up on that left-hand side where the right back usually plays. And yeah, if it's Harvey Neville, that's throwing him into the deep end too quickly. If it's McVay, that's probably a bit more doable and comfortable for him. So it really all depends on who starts and what the formation is. But I'm sure that Neville will get it correct.
Austin, Phil had said that DeAndre is 50-50 to go Friday night against Toronto in a game that really, if you watch the knock that he got against Saudi Arabia, it didn't look good. He started for the U.S. men's national team, I thought, playing fairly well for the time that he was on the pitch. Took a knee to knee and was immediately subbed out. He did fly directly from Spain to Toronto, or what left and didn't come back to South Florida because of the hurricane, as did Damian Lowe. So both of them were away from the team already in Toronto, awaiting the team's arrival. In terms of having that influx of uncertainty within the defensive line and going up against even you didn't deal with Jesus Jimenez last time, which you can throw him into the mix now too. That Toronto can throw your way. And I want to also talk about Mark Anthony Kaye in just a sec, but hold off on that for a minute. With having those guys up top, with Insigne, Jimenez, or whether it's Jimenez or Akinola or Bernadeschi up top, and you have that little uncertainty in the back line, is a guy like Harvey Neville, like, can you turn to him in a game like this, or what are your other options? Phil had some interesting ones this morning.
Yeah, who did he name dropped? Christopher McVay at right back, Victor Ulloa, who we have seen multiple times, and also Ryan Saylor along with Harvey Neville as a right back option. And for me, if I'm thinking about those guys, those names, honestly, because I know I have Kieran Gibbs at left back, I'm probably throwing Chris McVay there because he's just been your mainstay. He's been all reliable, and if he could do it on his right side, then that's what I would go ahead and trust. And I think honestly, if Yedlin's not going to play, then that's probably what I believe Phil Neville will do. But it was weird when Phil was talking about Yedlin though, because at first he opened up with it's looking like he's going to be a sure doubt. Then he said 50-50 about 20 seconds later on. So I'm wondering if they're leaning towards, it's okay, like he's going to play. From what we've heard, they said that when they get there tonight, Thursday night that is, that the club physios will assess him. It looks like, for me, by the way, that was like an orange card at its finest, by the way. Like that was a little bit more than a yellow in my opinion, but that's a whole other thing. It was a friendly anyway. For me, I would say Yedlin, he's a tough guy who puts in a ton of energy into every move he makes on the pitch. And if he's not down and out for the count, I think he's going to push to play. Honestly, I don't see why he wouldn't. I'm leaning towards that there's definitely like a 75% chance that he'll play, in my personal opinion. And I know he was taking it off, but I think he was going to be taken off anyway. I think Joe Scally was actually warming up before the injury actually happened. So I don't know if that was as telling as it seemed to be. I think there's an opportunity there, but for me, I don't know if Harvey's ready for it right now. This is a huge opportunity against some world-class players in Bernadeschi and Insigne, and you saw a lot of the time Insigne in that first Toronto match was dropping in a lot, causing a lot of issues, switching sides, going back and forth. It's just extremely hard to read, especially for a young player like Harvey who doesn't have the experience yet. I would throw Chris McVay in there if Yedlin's not a go at the right, and then throw Kieran Gibbs on the left and figure out a center-back pairing from there.
But here's my thing: is like you signed Harvey for this exact reason. Like this was the break glass and like this is why you brought Harvey in. No?
I would say yes, but right now you have better options than Harvey. I think that putting Chris McVay at right back and Kieran Gibbs at left back is a better option right now than Harvey. Now, if Kieran Gibbs can't play to the speed that Toronto's playing at, and he's getting beat a lot like Chris McVay was in that Toronto match as well, then okay, you switch Chris McVay back over to the left in the 60th or 45th minute, and you put Harvey in and say, you know what, go do a job. That I'm okay with, but I think from the jump, that decision to play Harvey Neville there in his first MLS start could be extremely exploited and play right into Bob Bradley's hands away from home.
Yeah, and I think that last point, I think if you do go with that, McVay at right back, the center back pairing could be Lowe and Mabika, which could work to their benefit considering, Toronto likes to cross the ball in a lot, and there's two tall center backs in the back line to kind of nod them away. So,
and another thing worth noting is that Phil was adamant in, I think it was a week or two ago, about staying away from the five at the back. So I don't think that's even an option either.
Yeah.
I don't think that's an option. I think it's... Yeah, you have to stay four at the back, and I think that he's going to do that. I honestly think if Yedlin doesn't go, it's going to be a back line of Gibbs, Lowe, Mabika, and Chris McVeigh on the right. However, I have this little gut feeling that Yedlin is going to really want to play.
Neither of you have Saylor. I'm surprised that neither of you would have Saylor in there.
no.
I would say just because, well, not at right back anyway, honestly. And Alex brought up a great point of Lowe and Mabika in terms of how much Toronto crossed the ball. I think they had 7 corners in the match. Bernardeschi was putting in a lot more than just that as well, from set pieces and from open play. So I think having Lowe and Mabika there to be strong, tall center backs to get headed clearances. Even if you start Drake Callender too, that's another presence inside of the box that can handle the ball really well. That's probably what you need to go with at the back.
Alex, I wanted to talk about Mark-Anthony Kaye because he will be introduced into this game. Most likely will start. He was injured in the first outing with these two teams facing off against each other. And we were, sitting next to each other in the press box, very surprised that they had instituted a defensive game plan to take Jaden Nelson out. I think with the speed that him and Insigne posed, allowing Insigne to really pinch in with Nelson going outside, they might try to replicate that in reverse with Bernardeschi. I guess I could see that happening with having Kaye sort of make that diagonal run, keeping Bernardeschi out wide to get numbers into the box for him to make those crosses. How does that change the dynamic with much more of an on-the-ball player? Not as much of a speed threat as Jaden Nelson is, but still can hurt you in terms of that, but a lot more technical of a player, Mark-Anthony Kaye.
Yeah, I think he'll be more composed on the ball compared to Jaden Nelson last time. Maybe not as quick, but Anthony Kaye is still an extraordinarily good player and can break lines and is that kind of central midfielder you want on your MLS team. So, Miami's going to have to be careful, and I think he'll be able to progress the ball a bit more comfortably compared to Nelson and get Insigne and Bernardeschi on the ball a lot more. So I do think that Miami could go again with that, pressing the number 8 approach, try to stymie that. So Insigne has to drop and kind of ruins everything for the Toronto setup. So, it entirely depends on who starts in the back line, because if it's, Harvey Neville, I don't think it's, feasible. But with Yedlin, he has enough speed to kind of recover and do that job. So, it just depends on the formational setup Miami comes out in and see how they're able to cope with this. But there's plenty of guys on the bench that can, do a job in that regard. And I'm sure Neville will use all that to the best of his capacity.
So, question, you're saying Mark-Anthony Kaye being in there is enough because in the second half of that first matchup between these two sides, Insigne dropped a lot to get on the ball. Is Mark-Anthony Kaye enough to relieve Insigne of that responsibility to get himself on the ball? Is Anthony Kaye enough for him to have just enough responsibility just up front alone?
So here's how I think that.
So.
Yeah, go ahead, Alex.
Hmm? Yeah, I think so. I think Mark-Anthony Kaye, he's extraordinarily good at progressive carrying and pass-wise. I'm looking at his stats now. He's in the 67th percentile, which is okay, but still good enough. He's really good in pressures, tackles, interceptions. He can get the job done. So, I do think that is a bit of a threat in that regard. But, it just depends on setup for Miami. If they have one guy man-marking him and Insigne is forced to drop a bit deeper, that could work out in their favor.
I almost think that they're going to go away from that, and I think that they'll throw Kaye on the right with Bernardeschi, and Kaye will make the diagonal run across, keeping Bernardeschi out wide. So you think how Insigne dropped down, and then almost the overlap with Nelson last time, it'll almost look the same, but you won't have to require that inversion with Bernardeschi. He'll stay high, and Kay will just come through like that. So you almost have like parallel diagonal lines. I think that presents a little bit of a more difficult challenge to specifically man mark. The way that you would naturally go against that is to zonal mark. And I know in this day and age, especially after what we saw over 180 minutes with the U.S. men's national team, no one's really clamoring for zonal marking on this side of the pond right now. It definitely presents challenges. It's a different look that they're going to give you. The natural way to attack that is to, I guess, sort of create a triangle with you're going to have to ask Pozuelo almost to commit a little more defensively and to create that triangle with him and keep a straight line with Gregory and Mota. That way, no matter what, from either side, there's always someone who's going to pick up that run. And then the other person is responsible for whoever comes out wide. So it's like what one person finds the runner, not on ball, but whoever's making that diagonal run, the person who that side is catches that, and then the other person is responsible for the spatial awareness around it. I think that's really the only way you're going to be able to deal with something like that, because they're going to try and attack you inside out. He's going to make that run to try and draw you with him, and that will leave Bernadeschi free in miles and miles of space on the side to get really free crosses in. So that's why losing a Yedlin, but especially why Kieran Gibbs will be so important, is keeping that width, keeping that pressure on that right-handed flank cross is going to be really key, I think.
Yeah, that's another good shot, I think, as well. That's a really good shot, I think. I don't know. It's hard to predict these things until the lineup actually happens. That's why, previews and whatnot, they're just difficult because players can get injured, or, coaches can come out in another formation, so we can all predict what they are going to do. But until we see both teams starting 11, then we can make more definitive assessments on that, honestly. I agree with your points, but I don't know. I think this Toronto team is a little bit wounded considering how, their last couple of games have gone. And I think with Bob Bradley, I think it's just going to be about damage control and seeing who he needs for next season. So he's going to be playing players that maybe are on the cusps, and he needs to see, if they're going to fit into what he's going to try to do next season or whatnot. So, but they're still going to come out very strong.
Final thing, just spatially for Inter Miami, would you go with two strikers up top with the potential of Campana and Higuain, or are they battling it out? I asked Campana about this earlier this morning. I'm wondering if you can only have one, and if one, who are you going with? Because you sort of have to pick which is the hot hand. Is it Gonzalo, who's done it over the totality of like 10 games lately, or is it Campana, who just had 2 goals in the last one? Which way do you go? Can you afford to go 2 strikers? I almost think you do, simply because you're going up against a team that is giving up 4 goals a game over the course of a month, and you need to score to get back to really make sure that you're in the playoffs. You control your own destiny. So if you score, you're in this. And so that's why I think, like, keep it simple, stupid. Throw the 2 up top and let them have at it.
Yeah, I mean, somebody mentioned earlier fluid front 4 with 2 holding midfielders, and I think if you're going to do that, I don't see how you sit either Campana or Higuain. Like, I don't know how you make that decision, so I just think you don't make that decision, and you play a front 4 with them 2, Pozuelo, and your most favored winger right now, probably Robert Taylor, Ariel Lassiter. I'm not 100% sure. It's going to be a tough decision. I think both of them are going to be, chomping at the bit to try and score a goal. If you're Leonardo Campana, yes, I'm going to bring in the Ecuadorian bias. They went 0-0 and 0-0 back-to-back in their international break, and their strikers weren't posing any threat. Estrada especially. So if I'm Campana, and I asked him about it as well, like how, balancing that, is it as much as it's about Inter Miami making the playoffs, you want to get on the plane to Qatar, so that's obviously at the back of his mind too. He's going to want to score goals. Higuain is still trying to do more and more, it seems, to keep on proving himself to this fan base and to the club that he's a worthwhile member and that he's really putting an impact on this team. If you have to make the decision, I'm actually not going to make it. I don't know who I would choose, but I really think that you play. I really think that you play both strikers, and
just like glossed over.
I literally can't make the decision. I don't know what I would do, and I would play both, and probably a Robert Taylor and Pozuelo all up there at the front, and figure it out and how they'll gel. And if you need some speed, you've got Emerson and Lassiter to come on if you really need a goal, but. I think this might be a goal fest anyway, and if Miami can score a couple early ones, then it's not much to worry about. So this game could go so many different ways that I'm getting a little nervous about it now the more we talk about it.
You're just lining up as a 4-2-4? A 4-2-4? Is that what we're thinking? Okay.
I'm thinking Pozuelo is going to naturally convert himself to a central playmaker 100%. It just depends on, can he take up the defensive responsibility on the left side to not isolate Kieran Gibbs? And if you're Robert Taylor, who's lined up on the right, can he take up the responsibility to cover up the makeshift right back that Phil Neville's going to have to put out onto the pitch if Yedlin's not there? And with that said, can Pozuelo have both responsibilities as a central playmaker and somebody who needs to cover up the left side of the pitch? I'm not 100% sure that that's possible, but I think, again, when you look at the score lines of these Toronto games that have happened in the last couple of weeks, they've given up a lot of goals and they've scored a lot of goals, and if you're going to play into their own hands, try and score more than them. I know, Ian, you've been screaming that for 3 years now with this club. Fight, score goals, and, play for the 5-5s. I just don't know how else to go about this game. This is why I'm not a manager in MLS right now.
Yeah,
Alex, prove us wrong. Yeah, what are you doing?
I would start both of them, but Higuain is going to need to track back and defend. Really, that's literally. I know he's a great goal scorer, but he could be such a liability on defense sometimes if he's not caring enough to track back. So I'd just play a 4-2-3-1 with Higuain as the 10, but he's really just the second striker alongside Campana. Lassiter on the actually, you know what? I don't know. Lassiter on the left flank, maybe Pozuelo on the right, tucking in with an overlapping from Yedlin if he starts. I don't know. There's plenty of ways they can go, but if it were me, I would just stick with the 4-3-3, bench Higuain or Campana, play with wingers. Keep it simple, really.
Wait! But if you're gonna do that, you have to pick one. I want to know who you would pick to start the match.
Campana, and then bring Higuain on later. I know he's in form, but
I like that. Yeah, I like that because Higuain is known to do it late, right? Like he comes in and he's efficient in those.
What's that stat? Miami score most of their goals after the 85th minute or something.
I think your 4-2-3-1 idea is probably what he goes with, though. If I was guessing, that I would say Pozuelo on the right, Lassiter on the left. It makes the most sense to me. Austin, to your point there with my goals theory, it actually comes from Ray Hudson. When I was a kid, I had a camp with him, and he told me that soccer is the only sport where when the ball's kicked off, you have the potential to tie, but soccer is the only sport when the ball's kicked off, you have to pick a mentality. If I don't give up a goal, I can't lose. If I don't score, I can't win. And every single player that kicks the ball off comes with a certain mentality, and that dictates which side of the ball you should be on. And I was a striker, so there you go. So thank you. I always appreciate it.
Wow, that's a little bit of wisdom there. Yeah, I like it.
That's where that comes from. Okay, let's talk playoffs because Toronto is officially eliminated from the playoffs, as is DC, as is Chicago. New England basically on the cusp here. Charlotte, Atlanta holding on by a thread. Charlotte can still get up to 47, Atlanta up to 46. So barely still in this, but they can be in it. Inter Miami tied on points with the Columbus Crew, 3 points behind Orlando, and now 4 points behind Cincinnati, but Cincinnati on 32 games played. They did get that draw at Seattle, which Phil had said earlier this morning that basically in his eyes that puts them in that 46 should be enough for them, especially closing out the year with Chicago and DC. You'd think that if they get at least 1 point, 2 points in that, they probably are over the finish line there. So when you're handicapping this, it really is Orlando, Miami, and Columbus. 3 teams for 2 spots. Guys, looking at it right now, it would look as though Orlando is the favorite in terms of points, but has the most difficult road. They have New York City this coming weekend, and then they finish against the two direct rivals. Austin, you mentioned that it's almost like a World Cup group stage. It will be for them, going on the road to Inter Miami and then hosting Crew on decision day. For the Crew, a little more straightforward. They have that Orlando game to finish the year. This weekend, they'll be at home in their final home game of the year against New York Red Bulls. And then midweek, they travel to Charlotte, a very formidable Charlotte home team up there with Inter Miami's one of the best home records, especially in the Eastern Conference. And then we all know for Inter Miami, it's simple. At Toronto, home to Orlando, home to Montreal on decision day, finishing the week out strong with 2 home games. So, guys, looking at that right now, if you had to guess the one team on the outside looking in with 3 games to play, who's your odds-on favorite there, and who's your odds-on favorite for the 6th seed? We'll start with the one on the way out with you, Alex. Who do you have as those 3 teams being left out of the party in the end?
Well, New England. I don't think they'll. Some of those losses they suffered late. I think that's.
I'm talking just in terms of Columbus, Miami, and Orlando.
I think Columbus will miss out. I don't know. I think their form, they have the tendency to give up goals late, and against the Portland Timbers a week ago. I don't know how long it was, but they gave up a super late goal in the 95th plus minute and like 5 minutes of stoppage time. And if they would have won that game, it would have hurt Miami. But Timbers managed to crawl back and get one, and it hurt them. If they would have won that would have pushed them up into the places a bit more and secured their spot. But they continue to slip points, and their upcoming matches, they don't look too good. They have the Red Bulls at home, and we know how good the Red Bulls can be. Charlotte and Orlando away for them. Charlotte's good at home, and Orlando, of course, they'll be looking to get a result as well. So, their schedule looks a little iffy for them. So I think Columbus will be the one team, missing out.
I think another good reason why Columbus could be the team to miss out, because if any of these teams tie on points, Columbus only have 9 wins right now with 3 games to go. If they're to win any games to move up and they tie on points with Orlando or Inter Miami, they're obviously winning games as well. There's no way Columbus would get up to that category. That would be the tiebreaker in terms of overall wins. So that's another reason why I think Columbus could be the team that misses out. I know Alex said New England as well. I don't think Charlotte or Atlanta catch up, in all honesty. I think Phil Neville said something about Atlanta today. Even Columbus being that good at home, I think they're just too far behind. I do think, and I fully agree with Columbus missing out. They've dropped a lot of results. They struggle to win games. They give up goals late. And I think that they have a very tough schedule. And that game against Orlando to end the season is probably going to be the haunting one for them.
So here's where I'm going to play devil's advocate. Every time I believed in the New York Red Bulls in a big game that matters for the playoffs, they've found a way to lose. Just every single time, seemingly. And if Columbus is able to pull off this win, let's say get a draw against Charlotte, all of a sudden they're at 46 heading into decision day. That puts a lot of pressure on Inter Miami and a lot of pressure on Orlando, who could, at New York City is no joke. So if they drop that, and then if they drop the Inter Miami game, they could possibly need a win at home on decision day. And that, or Orlando having such a difficult schedule, it would surprise me if they can't get 2 points in these 3 games in order to do it. But it's not out of the realm of possibility. If I was them, I would be feeling pretty uneasy. I would be happy that I have that 3-point cushion, because if I didn't have that, I'd be really nervous. They have by far the toughest stretch of anybody remaining throughout it, especially considering Montreal on decision day, Montreal on decision day knows that they're going to be playing a midweek game, knows that they're going to be the 2 seed, and so because of that has absolutely zero incentive to try in that at all. There's no reason for Montreal to play any player that they expect to play in the first round of the playoffs, and that's why I give that even more credence to Miami.
There's possibility for them to jump Philadelphia. No, I don't think it's going to happen. But
it's such a long shot. They'd need to make up 5 points in 2 games. They're at 59.
Yeah, so if Philadelphia drop 2 and Montreal win 2, it's there because goal differential is never going to happen. You've got 36 goals there, but they've got the same amount of wins. So technically, that's still there. And if Philadelphia lose those 2 games or lose that 1 game, I'd say, and you go into decision day, Montreal has something to play for if Philadelphia are to lose against Charlotte, who is at home, I believe, in that game. I think that Charlotte's at home, so that's.
Which is more reason, I think, for Philadelphia to have one of their stereotypical Philadelphia 6-7-0 games.
Yeah, that could happen. Yeah. That could happen. Yeah, guys, that could happen.
Guys, before we go, I wanted to talk about the international break in the U.S. men's national team and their performance, or lack thereof. A 2-0 loss to Japan in what was, I got to admit, one of the most disappointing U.S. men's national team games I've seen in a while, simply because of what you're trying to get out of it and how little you did. Obviously a meaningless friendly, but you follow it up with another lifeless 0-0 draw against Saudi Arabia. No team has ever gotten just 1 point from those last 2 games and gone on to make a deep run in the World Cup all the way to the final. I don't think anybody is thinking the U.S. men's national team is going to the final of the World Cup here, but it really was for all the problems that England has had, for all of the ups and downs that Wales had, and for all the, lack of confidence you have in Iran. You really felt, at least heading into this window, that, okay, well, the U.S., they might not be the favorites to win the group, but they should at least have a little, maybe a slight favorite to get out of the group. Given the way that they play, I would find that not true at all, given how this looks right now, and a stubbornness of Greg Berhalter, the likes of which I really have a tough time believing.
Yeah, I'll let Alex touch a ton on this because of her close ties to it right now with her new opportunity. Of course, congratulations, by the way. I think watching those 2 games, first of all, I have to say that as an Ecuadorian American, seeing 0 goals scored in 4 games was excruciating because none of my country scored at all in the 4 games. It was awful. But with the U.S. men's, it was I don't know if it was a lack of purpose in their passing or it was just you saw that they controlled the ball but did nothing with the ball. And the defensive instability at the back, the partnership between Zimmerman and Long. I think Zimmerman without Long is much better, so that's something I think needs to be addressed. Do you play Serginho Dest on the left or on the right? Is Anthony Robinson going to be healthy enough to go into the World Cup and start? There's so many questions right now, and with them not scoring goals.
He is back in training, though. Sorry to cut you off, but Anthony Robinson is back in training for Fulham, is expected to play, so yeah, he should be hopeful.
That's good. I think that they're really going to need that because that'll insert some stability to the back line, at least going into November 23rd. I think they play their first game. I just think there's too many questions right now to be asked, and you wanted to answer those questions in these 2 matches, and if anything, you're left with more questions now than you were before this international break, and I think that for me is the biggest problem. I think that looking at these 2 games, if I'm England, Iran or Wales, I'm saying I'm gonna employ a high press, and I'm gonna let also United States try and make passes because at some point they're just going to make an errant pass. They're going to lose the ball in a high press. They can't deal with the pressure, and we'll just take over on turnovers and counter, and that's how we'll win the game. And I think it's that simple right now for opposing teams to the United States.
Yeah, watching those 2 games, I don't know. It feels like a lot of shoehorning in players to fit a system that may not be to their best strengths. Maybe instead of playing out of the back, they can just I think the Saudi Arabia game was a good example of that, where Weston McKennie was just making these late into the box runs and giving the Saudi Arabians really, big fits. Sometimes U.S. just needs to play ugly to win. You're at a World Cup. Honestly, systematic formations and systems for national teams don't make sense. For club teams, yes, because you're with them most of the time. But for national teams, there should be a set way of playing. Yeah, but at the end of the day, you just play to your players' strengths. Look at the Netherlands. For so long they played in a 4-3-3, but under their new coach, which is I think Van Hal. I have to double check, but they're playing in a back three, and it's not what the Dutch are used to, but it's working for them. So I think it's too late to switch up the system that they've been playing, but yeah, I think I don't know. They're just gonna have to wing it, really. Even if the system doesn't work, plan A, go to plan C, like you're like Ferrari mid race where they're messing up the plans. So, like plan B.
Our secret F1 group chat just got exposed.
They have to switch to plan B because plan A, B, and C didn't work. So, that's what the U.S. will probably have to do mid-tournament. Just switch up their playing style because, England, let's be honest, they have talented players, probably more talented than the U.S. right now. They'll be able, even with their problems aside, they'll be able to just play through the U.S. quite easily because of the talent that they have. So, yeah, it's they just need to figure out, this World Cup aside, by 2026 they need to figure it out because there's a lot of
this is
golden group of players here, and
this was supposed to be it, though, right?
But this is what I was saying. This is what I was saying last week on the pod was that, I was going crazy talking about a 5 at the back for the men's national team and playing to these players' strengths. And they switched to it, but you have to play to the player's strengths. That's what Berhalter's not doing. He's so stubborn about this system that he wants to playing a high line, controlling the ball. The players aren't fit to do that right now. That's not the way they should be playing. And I think that's going to be the biggest mistake in Qatar for this team is they're going to stick to the style that he's had. That, yes, okay, in 2021, it won you a couple of CONCACAF titles, but for the most part, it's not going to translate on a global stage right now. Like, I don't think it's going to be positive, and I'm struggling to see how they manage results against a Wales and an Iran side who could just pressure them high, let them try and control the ball, and take over the game. Like, it's so frustrating to me, and that's why I was going on that rampage last week, because there's so many good players on this team and talented players. You just have to find a way to use them, and right now I think he's not getting the best of all of his players, and that's what you're supposed to do as a national team manager, and I think that he's failing in that department.
I don't know if you guys saw Iran versus Senegal, but Iran did a very good job of high pressing Senegal, just like Japan did to the United States. And Alex, to your point, Plan A, Plan B, and Plan C seem to be all the same plan for Greg Berhalter. I mean, he doesn't seem to have a plan outside of his plan, and that's each person has their own. We're going to break the field into 9s, and each person has their quadrant of 9, and they're responsible there. Once we get the ball, we're going to rebalance our attack. We're not going to use, off-ball transitional play where if we happen to get a turnover in midfield, we quickly press. Nope. We're going to slow it down. We're going to rotate around. We're going to balance everybody back out again, and then we're going to play out the back. It's very, you remember, actually, a couple of years ago, Pep Guardiola got a lot of heat for Man City not getting for this exact style of play, of saying you are locking talented players into a box and saying, still be your special self within this very narrow parameter that I'm putting you into. And great managers are able to adjust, which is why you've seen him. Pep is one of the best, if not the best, be able to adjust within the confines of the system. Greg's trying to play the same game. He's just doing it poorly. We got to call a spade on that. And my other thing, sorry, we haven't talked about this enough, so I'm just going to randomly throw it out there. Christian Pulisic drops way too deep, way too often, and completely takes himself out of place.
Yeah, that's why, honestly, with their number 9 issues, try playing him as a false 9. I don't know.
That's what I'm saying. So play the 4-3-3. Just make Pulisic the third midfielder, because that third midfielder, whether it was Del Torre, I love Yunus Musa.
Musa.
Whether it's Kellen Acosta against Saudi Arabia didn't do much. That third midfielder is never doing much in Greg's system. So make it Pulisic and get an extra attacker on the field because Pulisic is dropping deep enough as it is.
Well, I think with Musa on the pitch, you would see that because Musa on the ball is going to go forward and get past defenders one-on-one. They didn't have somebody like De La Torre had an awful game against Japan. Kellen Acosta is not that type of guy to do it against a side like Saudi Arabia. So I think that if you have Yunus Musa in there when he's healthy, we might have seen that, but unfortunately we just didn't get to see him play. And that's why I said this team has been left with more questions now than they came into it with. And who's the backup to Musa if he's not going to be the third midfielder? Or what do you do if Adams or McKinney don't play? There's a lot to be asked of this side right now.
Yeah.
We are less than 2 months away now, guys. Officially less than 2 months away. Less than 8 weeks away from World Cup Qatar 2022. In the meantime, Inter Miami has a huge weekend on the slate for them. Friday night, they will play Toronto FC. That's the only game of the evening. But just to give you a heads up on the other games that matter, Saturday at 1:30 is New England hosting Atlanta. At 5:30, Charlotte hosts Philadelphia. Then later on in the evening, at the same time, Columbus hosts Red Bulls and Cincinnati hosts Chicago. And then on Sunday, the big one will be New York City hosting Orlando. That game actually again at Red Bull Arena in New Jersey. It seems like forever since NYCFC have played at Yankee Stadium, or only like 1 or 2 games all summer they've played at home. But will be another big game and a big chance if NYCFC can come out with a win. That just makes, Wednesday's game, when we're talking, all that much important. Quick news and note, because I think I forgot before we head out of here that Coco John is going to be fit, healthy, as is Breck Shea, who's been training. We just learned that a little while ago that Coco will be available. And Phil, I didn't want to forget with us not talking about this. Coco, Phil alluded to, not a lot of teams have seen a lot of him, and that can be a little bit of a secret weapon. Do we agree, or is it a little too risky at this important stage of the year?
No, that's fair. Yeah, I don't know, that's fair.
If you need a goal late on and you're struggling and results are not going your way, you got to throw an attacker out there. That's who I'm putting on.
The 4th highest rated player on Inter Miami according to the FIFA ratings, which was very surprising. Coco was. So definitely they're seeing some talent there. All right, guys, we'll get out of here. She is Alex Winley. He is Austin Robillard. He is our producer, Andres. I am Ian Hess. Make sure you follow us here on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on Instagram. Follow us on Twitter. Like, subscribe, rate, review, all that fun stuff. And please stay safe as we all recover back from the devastating Hurricane Ian. I hope you're all safe. I hope this was a nice break from it all. And I hope that Inter Miami can give another one this weekend and we can all build back better and happier and wonderful through this hurricane with all. That has been this week's Heron Outlet. Again, make sure you like, subscribe, follow, and we will see you back here next week.